welcome to the January Audit Committee meeting. Can I check everyone that can hear me okay? Yeah. And online, can you hear me? Perfect, thank you. Just remind members of the committee that if you can't attend the meeting, please can you arrange for a substitute for the meeting. As always, the agenda pack and papers have been published via ModGov and are available on the council website. Due to the late availability of some papers, Supplement 1 contains reports for agenda items 5, 6, 8 and 10 and 11. Reports for item 10 and 11 are only available in the private area of ModGov as they're confidential. Supplement 2 contains reports for agenda item 9. Sorry, my microphone keeps flickering, is that? Supplement 3 contains the public questions. Just to remind all members that when you're invited to speak, if you can clearly state who you are for the benefit of anyone listening online. When members aren't speaking, if you can mute your microphone, please, just to reduce the amount of feedback we get. Welcome to members of the press and public who are in attendance today. It's always nice to have visitors. Very welcome. The meeting is, as always, being recorded. So just everyone's aware of that. We're not expecting a fire evacuation drill this morning, so if it goes off, we're all going to follow Alan today out of the building. Right, so on to agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence. I've got Norman Cavell and Barry Clark is substituting. Welcome, Barry. Councillor Simon Caswell, Martin Lovell is subbing, and unfortunately Lindy Van Vuren, our independent member, can't be with us today. Okay. Have I missed anyone? Has anyone got any other apologies for absence that I'm not aware of? No? Perfect, thank you. So move on to item 2 of the agenda, which is the minutes from the previous meeting. Firstly, for accuracy.
Sorry, Chair, there are no minutes from the previous meeting this month. I think your schedule says there are.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Declarations of interest? Any? No, everyone happy? So moving on to item 4, which is public question time. So I've got question 1, which is Mr. Andrew Lee. Mr. Lee, you're welcome to come up. I think there's a microphone here for you. You have, as always, 3 minutes, and then officers will provide a response for you. Okay, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. The external auditors have noted significant weaknesses in the arrangements relating to contract management and procurement and have raised the key recommendation for it. I draw your attention to page 45 of the Interim Auditor's Annual Report, which says key findings included the absence of a tender process, weaknesses in contract monitoring and purchase orders not being raised. Through you, Mr. Chair, I would like to ask the auditors, how many contracts did you identify that failed to use the tender process? And what was the value of those contracts in total so identified? Were they simply restricted to children's services, or are other areas of the council affected too? Now, I have a second question. Do you want me to take that now?
Chair, I believe that I'm going to answer, so I'm quite happy to do the answer to the first question now, if that's okay.
I had hoped that I might address that question to the auditors as it was their report.
Barry, are you happy to take a question from the public?
That's fine, Chair. So we were reporting back on the report that was undertaken both by the Council's internal auditors and we reviewed their work, and therefore we were repeating the findings that they identified and the recommendations that they identified. So again, that's matter back to the Chair that we were just reinforcing the issues that were identified by internal audit.
Would you like a substantive response?
If possible, yes, please.
To Liz, are you happy to give your prepared response?
I will. Good morning, Mr.
Good
Lee
morning.
or Andrew. So for your question 1, the key recommendation that Grant Thornton raised related to overall contract management and procurement governance and reflected delays in progress made brackets, due to service restructures, close brackets, since a similar key recommendation in 22-23. So we have confirmation that Grant Thornton's judgment was not based on review of individual contracts or a particular service, rather on discussions with officers, the update on reviews of contract management presented to Audit Committee in May 2024, the internal audit children looked after placement, and review of process relating to procurement waivers and the procurement strategy. Progress against this recommendation is reported to this Audit Committee at every meeting. That's the answer to question 1, which of course will come to you in writing as well.
Thank you.
Okay. If you'd like to ask a second question, Silly.
Thank you, Chair. Again, the council, is an open and transparent council, yet it's very difficult for the press and public to understand the extent of failures of the procurement policy because the breaches and waivers report is kept confidential, even to the extent that the auditors say, and again, quoting from the same report, the Audit Committee were not provided with waiver reports to allow for member scrutiny and challenge where approved procurement processes designed to achieve value for money were not followed. Even if we accept that you won't name individual contracts where processes have not been followed, surely it is in the public interest if there is a breakdown in procedures for procurement, which is, let's face it, the main activity of a council. It doesn't really receive much money, but it does spend a lot of money. Surely there is no valid reason why we should not know, as members of the public, what the total amounts subject to a failure in contracting should be. And even if we are not allowed to see the waivers and omissions report, I can't understand any reason why we should not know what the total amounts are that are referred to in that report. And I'd be delighted to have a response from Councillor Lotion, but again, I would be curious to know what the auditor's opinion on that is.
Okay. So, Barry, I'm going to put you on the spot again. Are you happy to provide your auditor's response to Mr. Lee, and then I'll bring in the officers for the full substantive?
Sorry, Chair. So I'll bring in first Dan Povey, who's my colleague that's undertaken the review. He will offer a view, and if he does the hospital pass back to me, then I'll respond. Dan, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Audit Committee members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Dan, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, we've raised a key recommendation about embedding robust procurement procedures across the council, and that, of course, does include reporting waivers regularly to the Audit Committee to provide that oversight and challenge where approved processes aren't followed. Where we don't see a regular report to the Audit Committee on procurement waivers being presented, we do see this at other councils, and we do make similar recommendations. We would expect to see a procurement waiver report at some level of detail being presented to members of the committee for scrutiny, and obviously you're not going to put in anything that's commercially sensitive in there, but certainly a level of information that allows proper scrutiny and challenge to the level and type and reasons why procurements are not being followed. So we would expect to see that.
Okay, thank you. So, Liz, are you providing the response to question 2?
If I may, thank you, Chair. So for question 2, the Audit Committee received an annual summary report for 2023-24 at the committee meeting held on the 12th of November 2024. Following discussion at the last Audit Committee, it was agreed the base information would be confidential as it included officers' names and the perceived justification for the non-adherence to the normally required process. The publishable information would then be available on an annual basis. This would be in addition to the authority's published contract register and publication of spend reporting. Audit Committee now receive a quarterly report summarising incidents, which is the paper on the agenda today. Following a review of this paper, we have adapted and republished the paper with the public report, including details of the volume and value of waivers and breaches. The confidential appendix remains with the further detail. And I would just add that my title as lead member, which was Resources and Performance, is now Resources, Procurement and Performance. And so you can guess, I'm sure, where some of my focus lies now, and
Sure.
quite correctly so. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Just to add from my perspective, the obviously the audit is always a backward-looking process. Some of the things that are referred to in the audit have already been put in place, so it is our intention to receive these regular reports now. Part of the challenge of Audit Committee over the last 12 to 15 months has been clearing the backlog of predecessor body audits, which I'm sure you'll agree is a good thing, because it allows us some assurance over the opening balances for the council. So now we've moved into a different phase of operation as the Audit Committee, and we will start to change the way that our agendas are presented and managed. So this is an attempt to get on the front foot in terms of addressing those prospective risks for the council. So just to explain the context in which those reports are given. Thank you. Thank you. So we have a second public question.
Yeah. Sorry, it's me. Sorry. Can I just interrupt? Could I ask Mr. Povey, could you turn your camera off until your item? It's just that people at home won't be able to see the room. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Yes, I will do that now.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a second public question, which is Mr. David Orr. I see Mr. Orr has joined us online. Are you still there, Mr. Orr? Did you want to read your statement out?
Chair, I'm happy for somebody there to read it out, so you don't have to watch me.
Okay.
Officials.
So the statement has been circulated to all committee members. So in the interests of managing the time for the meeting today, I'm going to ask that we go straight to the response to the statement, which is delivered by Councillor Lation.
Sorry, Chair, a point of order. I asked for it to be read out on my behalf in case I couldn't find the time or my comms wasn't up to it. If you're saying you're not going to read the statement out, then I'm going to be forced to read it out, aren't I?
Well, I asked you if you wanted to read it out, Mr. Orr.
Well, I agreed with the clerk that it be read on my behalf, so I'll read it then. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. That's absolutely all right.
Right. Last July, this country elected a Labour government with a massive majority. Large councils hope that the national crisis in social care funding be addressed ahead of speedy reform. Care reform with actual implementation has been delayed until 2029 or beyond. Why is this council pursuing the same unsustainable strategy to avoid bankruptcy they had under the last Tory government? The national care crisis funding gap from now until 2029 is the clear responsibility of the new Labour government. They should be providing bridging care funding for large councils until actual reform arrives in 2029 or later. Council taxpayers and small and town parish councils cannot bridge a social care funding gap forecast to be £200 million by 2028-2029. This council may seek to raise council tax by 15% without a referendum, and I think you've made that application. That would be a collaboration with an increasingly unpopular new government who are avoiding solving the national care crisis before 2029. The large council tax bills and a cost of living crisis for fewer and worse services would surely result in a negative voter response in the 2027 local council elections. You should, with Somerset MPs, be loudly lobbying this Labour government for sustainable funding for dignified care services in Somerset. How can the Labour Party, which in 1945, at the end of a war, who founded the NHS, created state pensions, built 1 million homes with 80% for council rent, and with a debt 2.5 times what we have now. Ignore a national care funding crisis that will bankrupt most large councils within a few years. The last Tory government granted Somerset a 37 million capitalisation directive without any extra funding. Unusually, this allows the council to bypass normal accounting rules to use money from asset sales or borrowing to cover day-to-day expenses. Do Somerset council taxpayers realise this council is selling commercial investment assets in a poor market, crystallising losses, some significant? The one-off money raised is temporarily funding the social care gap in Somerset and the bill for the coming large-scale redundancies. It is not going to pay off borrowing or reduce interest bills. Somerset Council inherited a commercial investment portfolio, these are rough figures, of 300 million, mostly borrowed over long term up to 50 years, generally useful returns coming in income of 20 million a year. Under the current bonkers policy, almost all of these income generating assets will be sold off by 2026-27, incurring losses that could exceed £100 million while losing the 20 million a year of income. What the public don't understand is that all of the debt will remain, with current and future council taxpayers on the hook for £500 million or more, plus of debt and interest for up to 40 years to come. How is that prudent or sustainable? The national care crisis doesn't excuse the abysmal management performance identified in the 8 summary pages of the annual external auditors report. A really good report, and I commend it. This council did not properly plan for the new unitary council in the year before 5 councils became one. Unbelievably, almost 2 years on, the auditor remains concerned about the lack of a full business case and operating model. The council still has 6 planning systems, 5 environmental health systems, etc., and a website that doesn't maximise citizen self-service. The auditor raises concerns as to how, after 3 years to properly plan, the council can lose hundreds of staff without the identified technology and process improvements being in place. Public services and council staff would bear the brunt of these senior management failings. In the private sector, those senior managers responsible for this sorry state of affairs will be long gone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Orr. So I've got a response from Councillor Lation.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Orr. Thank you very much for your feedback. I acknowledge your concerns regarding the funding challenges for local government. We continue to lobby the government as the central funding system is broken, particularly for social care. Like other councils, we are keenly waiting to see the details of the final local government settlement in early February, ahead of considering the budget for 25-26 and the proposals for that budget at our full council meeting on the 26th of February, following, of course, scrutiny and executive. Sale of commercial assets is a component of the council's financial strategy. The sale of these commercial investment assets is a necessary measure to address the council's current financial challenges through exceptional financial support. The debt associated with these assets will remain, and the council is aware of the long-term financial implications. If the council were to retain these assets, it would need to borrow funds to pay for the exceptional financial support and make additional financial provision for the revenue costs of repaying these additional loans. The council is committed to addressing the recommendations suggested by the auditor, and like you, I found the report very comprehensive, very clear, and a good read, not a welcome read, but a good read because I find it constructive. I just want to add 2 things, if I may, Chair, that this council has submitted an application to MHCLG with a number of options for exceptional financial support. And the letter from the leader, Councillor Bill Revens, backs up the fact that there are a number of options, not one, as referenced by Mr. Orr. And there is a reference in Mr. Orr's question about 50-year borrowing, and that is not something that I personally recognise. So thank you for the opportunity to respond. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Lation. So on to our third public question of today. Mr. Nigel Behan. Welcome, Mr. Behan. Would you like to read your question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Speaking about item 6 in particular, the external auditor's annual report, interim, sorry, and the accompanying papers, January 2025, and the supplement agenda. I'm Nigel Behan. I'm the branch chair for Unite the Union. I'm also part of the formal trade union consultation. The annual audit report from Grant Thornton raises concerns that the trade unions have been raising for some months, but without satisfactory answers to maintain the confidence and trust of our members. The critical report states that the Council is delivering the workforce reduction programme before the development of the detailed transformation programme business case and before key enabler projects relating to ICT, data and process improvement have been implemented. The implementation of the staff reduction programme presents a significant risk that reductions in staff will impact on the Council's capacity to deliver services before they are effectively transformed. And I'd just like to go on to say that I was a senior union rep in 2011 following the banking crisis, when the County Council felt required to make large staff reductions with very little time for planning and implementation. This was done with minimal levels of compulsory redundancy, which should always be the joint aims of the employer and the trade union. There was time to prepare for this new unitary council, and we're coming up to 2 years as a new council. I am at a loss to understand how the auditor is making these observations about a lack of business planning and implementation of systems and unitary service processes. The response from the council to these serious deficiencies is not something I could put before my members, because it fails to convey a sense of serious planning with intent for delivery. Grant Thornton make a key recommendation that the council should mitigate the risk of implementing the organisational restructure before the development of the wider business transformation business case. It is vital our members' confidence and trust are restored, and that consultation with the trade unions is always meaningful. I'd like to ask the Council to pause briefly and take time to meet the auditor's concern and implement their recommendations for a full business case alongside the necessary enabling work. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Behan. So I've got a response from Councillor Butt-Phillip.
Thank you very much, Mr. Behan. Thank you for your detailed question regarding item 6 of the interim external auditor's annual report for 2023-24. We appreciate your engagement and the concerns that you've raised on behalf of Unite the Union. We acknowledge the critical points highlighted by Grant Thornton, particularly the timing and implementation of the workforce reduction programme. The concerns about the potential impact on the Council's capacity to deliver services are significant and continue to warrant our careful consideration. In response, we remain committed to addressing these concerns comprehensively. We agree with Grant Thornton's recommendation to mitigate the risk of implementing the organisational restructure before developing the wider transformation business case. We are costing an analysis of the capacity required to deliver transformation and improvement over the next financial year, that's 2025-26. This may provide employment opportunities to defer the need for some immediate compulsory redundancies. We are taking steps to ensure that a full improvement and transformation organisation-wide business case is developed alongside the necessary enabling work, including ICT, data and process improvements. This activity will build on the 2024-25 improvement and transformation business case, outlining a new approach to transformation and the workforce programme business case, which was initially discussed at the executive last year on the 23rd of January 2024. We value the impact and collaboration of the trade unions and are committed to ensuring meaningful consultation and minimising the need for compulsory redundancies. Our goal is to maintain the confidence and trust among our staff and stakeholders through transparent and strategic planning, communications and governance. Thank you for bringing these important issues to our attention, and we look forward to continuing to work closely with you and the trade unions to achieve our shared objectives.
Thank you to all members of the public who submitted questions today. So I'm going to move on to item 5 on our agenda, which is the interim external auditor's annual report for 2022-3. So I've got Maria, are you presenting? Or Barry?
Nicola.
Nicola.
Good morning, members. So as you know, this committee receives an update on progress against the action plan in response to the recommendations in the interim auditor's annual report for 22-23 at every committee meeting to support the committee's responsibility to monitor progress of the action plans. In 22-23, the external auditors made no statutory recommendations to the council, but they did make 7 key recommendations and 6 improvement recommendations. Table 8 in the tables in paragraph 8, summarise the progress in achieving the recommendations via the associated actions. All details are provided in appendices A to D. Progress in completing the actions continues to be made since the last report to committee. However, there are still 6 recommendations to be fulfilled with 6 associated actions. These are set out in paragraph 9 of the report. All actions have been updated and quality assurance and validation undertaken by finance. So when an officer does inform finance who are reporting to you the progress of this report, we do actually ask for evidence of the completed action so that we've got that logged, so that when audit come along and ask, we've got that to be able to supply of why we believe that recommendation was complete, so that evidence is there. It's worth noting this month, because of the next agenda item in terms of the auditor's report for 22-23, 23-24, sorry, get my years muddled. A comparison of progress has been undertaken against the recommendations, which has resulted in one of the actions that actually has moved from being completed to actually we now believe is in progress. And this is shown on paragraph 13 of the report. And this is in relation to why we believed it was complete, because we felt that we had put all the necessary steps in place, but actually when looking at that again, it actually did speak about the budget for 25-26, which we are in the process of obviously getting ready to take to committee. So that's why we've retracted the completion of that action, just because obviously that work is currently in progress. As the committee have previously had interest in the progress of the actions in relation to the Children's Transformation Programme, we have the Service Director for Children's Commissioning and Performance, Richard Selwyn, with us in the room, and we also have Sian Kenny, who's the report author, also in the room with us. And should members want to ask any particular questions in this, members may note we do have the service attending our March committee to discuss the development in relation to the dedicated schools grant management plan. But the team are happy to take any questions.
Okay, so opening the floor to questions from members. Gwil, Diogo. Gwil?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to highlight IR5, which is the ensure sufficient capacity and staff are suitably trained to respond to Ombudsman investigations. Just to let the committee know that in my capacity as chair of community scrutiny last week, we had the customer complaints report, which included an item on the Ombudsman. Generally, none of the directorates met the target for responding to complaints, and we're on the 90% percentile for responding for the Ombudsman upholding complaints against us. That's 90% of complaints against us are upheld. And in 23-24, this had a financial cost of £136,000. It's been, to be fair, it has been said that a lot of the money was paid out, which would have been or should have been paid out initially, but nonetheless there is a reputational risk here. And I think what slightly concerns me about the progress on this, we've got 2 months left of the year, we've got a deadline of the 31st of March. This is only 50% complete. And one of the things we didn't hear about yesterday when we were discussing the transformation plans was the potential impact on customer service staff, because I got the distinct impression that that was an area where we would be looking to contract in order to automate as far as we could. So I'm just seeking some reassurance really that this is on track, will be delivered, given that we're and the staff are in a period of considerable flux at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, looking for officer response, Sian.
Thank you for your question. In the assurance that Nicola mentioned and the validation of the progress against this, I've been speaking to the individual that is taking the responsibility for ensuring that there are improvements. What's happened over the last few months is that they've employed new staff, they're undertaking training, and that is why they feel that they've not quite met the progress towards the 31st of March, but all those staff have now received the training and they're starting to hope that they're starting to see those improvements in responses in a timely fashion to the Ombudsman escalation process. So it's literally that they've not had the resources and then they got the resources, they trained them, and now they're in a position to start hopefully seeing an impact against those Ombudsman escalations.
Yoga.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things really. So Nicola already picked up on the one thing I was going to mention, KR41, where that's kind of, we've taken a step back there. I'm just confused really because the title last month was the same as it was this month, and it did mention 25-26. And so if we're showing something complete, but the next month it's not complete, although the title is exactly the same, it just worries me, is there anything else that we're therefore showing as complete but not complete for any other reason, although obviously we as members thought it was? That's number one, but I've heard your point that you've made. The other thing, I'm a simple man and I really like reading simple documents. Obviously I'm in the wrong committee for that, I get it. But I said it, I think I said it at last meeting, it's my second one. I find it hard in the appendix to track the changes from month to month. I'm having to open up whilst I'm sitting here last month's appendix and then compare to this month, which makes it really complicated as a member. And I make the ask if that can be made better, easier to read, easier to flow through in the appendix. KR1B, I got confused about as well. Like I said, I'm simple. Last month, the title of that particular one was much shorter, it's about 5 or 6 words long. This month, you've got almost a paragraph in that title. What I want to understand is there a difference, therefore, to that particular risk, or is it just complicating the title for the sake of making it complicated? I'm just trying to get my head around it.
Sian, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'm really sorry. In a previous version of this, I did have a footnote which explained to the audit committee, but I think in regenerating the report, I lost the footnote. But that change was made. So this is around children's transformation, and Richard and I have had a conversation around what is the actual content of the recommendation, and clear what it is that we're reporting on. So the extension to the action narrative or description was trying to provide more clarity around the fact that although the transformation programme is a 4-year programme, this is an annual auditor's report, and the specific action in relation to the 22-23 recommendation was in relation to the medium-term financial plan for 24-25, not the overall 4-year programme. So it was the intention of increasing the text in that narrative was to provide more clarity.
Thank you. And then just the last general one, just obviously we're getting closer to the end of March and most of these are 31st of March. I just want to know generally, are we on track to achieve 100% in those that aren't 100% in the next 2 months?
Sian, are you best placed to answer that?
So the validation of the assurance and kind of challenge back to the action owners and the services that are responsible for delivering these is, are you going to achieve it by the deadline? And at the moment, there feels like there is a lot to do before the end of March, but there are things in place that those action owners are working on as we speak, that they still feel that they're confident. And what they're responding to me, for example, the Ombudsman one, is that actually we are still the intention is that those actions will be complete by the end of March or their due date. So there is challenge and there's still some risk that they might not be. But
I'm going to bring Maria in at this point.
I think it's important to flag that this is the 22-23 annual auditor's report, and actually our job as an organisation is to implement these as quickly as possible. So to your answer to your question, we need to get them implemented. If we don't implement them, when the auditors do their next report, which is later on in this agenda, you will see that they will start to flag the same things. They don't go away because they're not implemented. So it's our job to get these implemented and any other recommendations implemented as soon as possible. And if we feel at the time where the report is being written that actually we've got this evidence, then we need to produce it so the recommendation doesn't materialise in the first place. So I think when we come on to the 23-24 annual auditors report, I think we'll pick up on some of these, but we need to be implementing them.
Okay. Other questions from members? Habib?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quickie here. On IR6, improving economy, efficiency, effectiveness, and so on, to benchmark the performance, I'd just like clarification on how often do we actually review progress against outcome?
Really interesting, because benchmarking at the moment I am so interested in for this council, having arrived in August. So I want to see all the benchmarking reports. We are collating them all at the moment. We are working quite heavily in finance and linking in with our data and intelligence team so that we can understand benchmarking and where it's coming from. The RO forms, the revenue outturn forms, which benchmarking reports tend to be based on, run in arrears. So at the moment we're just waiting for the 23-24 RO reports to be released so that they can actually feed into the benchmarking to be the nearest that we can in terms of seeing that information and assessing where we sit on the spectrum of services, where we can make improvements, where we sit with nearest neighbours. I think it's an invaluable tool, actually, benchmarking. It might not give us the answers to everything, but it gives us an indication as to where we are.
Alan?
Thank you, Chair. If I may just add to what's been said there, we also suffer, like all new unitary councils suffer, in the sense that there is very little benchmarking data available. That information is still being compiled and compared. So there is a general issue with all new unitary councils that comparable data that you would expect to see at that national level reported by colleagues at the LGA, for example, isn't yet available. So the work that Maria and her colleagues are doing is to collate what we have and be able to have that comparable data. I would expect it to be at least another year before that comparison across all councils is available to members, but we will do our best to kind of fill those gaps in the interim. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Alan. Richard, just a quick question from me on KR1B, which is the Children's Service Transformation Programme. And obviously most transformation programmes are incredibly complex to deliver, but the delivery of this programme is probably critical to the council's ongoing sustainability. So for me, as much as we've made progress in lots of the other areas, this is the critical one that's just outstanding. What assurance can you give us over your ability to meet the deadlines and to meet the objectives set out in the transformation programme? Are there any barriers or challenges which will prevent you from making that progress?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Yeah, I've brought some slides along if that would help, just to show progress and give some detail.
It's tricky if we've not how long is this?
Okay, Helen's got the slides.
Okay, Helen, pop them up. We'll have a quick look.
Like you say, it becomes a bit. There's a lot of detail to go through. So if we go to, I think we've covered 2 and 3, the responses that we've put in place. 4 is probably a useful one to take a look at. So this is the overarching transformation programme as it stood for this financial year. We have made some changes now.
It's not up there yet.
Next one. Sorry, slide 4. There we go. So the overarching transformation programme, we've made a few changes recently to it, but this is the one that's more relevant to the question from the audit. So we've got 4 areas that we're working on, in particular in transformation for children's services. This is an overarching transformation programme that covers everything across education, social care, the work that we do with health colleagues, early help work, all that type of stuff. So in the top left, you can see local mainstream school is the right choice for most children. So this is our Education for Life programme that we've been putting in place for the last couple of years. That's coming through really well now. Starting to
Richard, can I just stop you just 1 second? There's some comments online that the slides are not showing. Can we just check from a technical perspective if there's any reason why that should be? Okay. Sorry for anyone online. You're not. Yeah, it's possibly one of the settings, but oh, so you should be able to click on the image if you're on Teams. You can change your camera view to the.
So you can see them.
Yeah. Okay, carry on, Richard. Sorry.
Thank you. So the education side is really critical. Education is a protective factor for young people as well, and that's been missing a bit in the past. So what we've got to do is really build that up and be able to reduce the number of children coming into care services. On the right-hand side, you can see developing an excellent workforce for children. Really critical issues like retention, recruitment of social workers, but also starting to think through what a neighbourhood working model will look like. We've been putting the foundations in place for that, and you'll see news of that over the next coming months as we transition to a neighbourhood based model of working with our colleagues in health and adult services as well. Down the bottom right, children in care. This is a really big one financially in terms of council budgets. So there's a significant amount of money, amount of effort going into that in terms of the market. It is a really difficult national market, and demand has been very high. We're seeing complexity coming through, which means children, young people are staying longer in care, and also the effects of COVID, but also poverty, cost of living crisis, things like that, having a really big impact, and that's been driving demand and costs as well. But you can see the activities that we're putting in place, which are quite significant. And on the bottom left, we've got a combination of Best Start in Life and Connect Somerset, which is looking at building up that early help capacity, helping residents much earlier when needs develop, so that reduces the likelihood of families and other residents requiring services later on. So it's quite a comprehensive multi-year, 4-year programme of work in order to get on top of the challenges which were set out by the Grant Thornton report. So if we move on to the next slide, so the change that Sian mentioned was to reference the MTFP work that we've been doing this financial year. There's been a huge amount of activity, and we've got that set out in a bit of detail here. So the first line there, you can see that we've achieved in blue £1.8 million worth of savings, but we haven't achieved £1.5 million worth. And this is because this was the new dynamic purchasing system and Thrive 16 service that we set up. And what we did was identify children that we thought would be able to move quite quickly to the new service, but various things got in the way, like a child might have exams, and so therefore it's not in the child's interest to move them and disrupt that placement when they're having exams. And so there were quite a few things which meant that it took longer to move children across. You can see on the right hand side, though, that if we look at the full year effect of the savings we've made, it's £3.1 million. So we're getting up to the full year effect that we need from that line.
Richard,
but we haven't quite achieved
so
overall.
Just to come back to my original question, which is about the ability to achieve the savings in the transformation programme. So are you confident that you can achieve what we need as a council in order to balance the budget? So what was set out in the transformation programme, will it be achieved?
So it's not going to be achieved this year. There are unachievable savings in the list. So that's what I was leading up to. So that was one of the unachievable savings. It's delayed by about 6 months, that savings implementation. If I pick out another couple of lines, there's one on the next slide, which is just here. So the £0.7 million, so £700,000, that's not being achieved in terms of moving children from residential care into fostering. We did achieve that with 2 children, worked really hard with companies to be able to get that change to happen, but we haven't been able to achieve it with other children, mostly due to a lack of fostering capacity in the system. We're continuing to work with providers, and that's one of the things we've brought to the next financial year, is to work even harder on that particular effort as well. We also have some delays somewhere else in here in terms of Homes and Horizons homes being implemented. Those delays are due to things like trying to have to set up the planning and some other delays as well, which have meant that the saving will come, but it'll come a bit later. So overall, we're reporting 70% achievement against this. We do have significant mitigations that we're putting in place for next financial year. But because of the nature of the commissioning work that we do, they won't be delivered this financial year because it takes time to put those things in place. And slide 8 might be helpful for.
Sorry, I've lost the slides. I can't put them up.
Okay.
They've failed. Sorry.
We'll
Don't worry about that
later, but showing that overall, particularly for children in care, there's a significant amount of activity going on that's trying to achieve the savings that we all want to make. But in the context of that larger demand that we anticipated, children staying longer due to complexity, and a really nationally difficult market where over 90% of local authorities in the country are reporting overspends on children's services budget because of this market.
Okay, Heather.
Just also wanted to say, and thank you, Richard, for the slides. I think they can be really helpful. I just want to say as well, from my perspective on this, looking at the 22-23 year, and because that was the original question, I think, wasn't it, Mike, about are we going to get the 22-23 year things signed off? I think in terms of the mitigations and the contracts that are now in place, then that they're in place. We may not be seeing the benefits as quickly as we wanted to, but the 16+ contract where we look after children who have, who have to move out of our kind of residential care after 16 and get into independent living, that is now in place. And whereas we only had half a year's worth of benefits for it this year, it's in place now. So we can kind of tick that off as one of the mitigations needed. And I think the question about the transformation, for instance, transformation programme, it is, in fact, very complex over 4 years. What we spent this year doing is trying to focus it through the transformation board into what can we achieve with the resources and the time that we have available. And that's what we've been trying to track through the year. So I'm not going to sit here and say definitely it's going to be 100%, but I think we will have put in place for the 22-23 requirements the things that we need to have in place. And then we just need to make sure that we build on that through the rest of this year so we can report more effectively next year.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Maria?
Just to bring a few threads together on this one, it's particularly important that we recognise that any savings are built into the medium-term financial strategy and as part of the 24-25 financial position. So actually anything that's not been delivered to time, profile and value, and I know that's not the remit of this committee, but there is a read across from one committee to another in terms of the financial position. It's incredibly important for every saving to be delivered to time, profile and value, so that we do not have forecast overspends or we have substitutes and mitigations. So while this is also in the annual auditor report of 22-23, it has a direct impact on how we're operating as an organisation. So I just want you to have that context.
I'm gonna move on, Habib. Is it on this specific issue, and can you make it quick?
Don't I always make it quick?
Try and make it quicker.
But basically on the children's services and transformation, I just wanted to find that I know from the sort of it's a challenging part of the our funding and so on. I just want to know from the process element to the delivery. What is the plan, and what does the trajectory looks like? Are we sort of, almost in the right place, or is the need increasing, and then we have to address that need, with the special needs children, especially? So, where are we in a good place, or potentially are we, going to be challenged in years to come? Was that quick enough?
Yeah, we always need to be careful about straying into children's scrutiny territory, and that's, I think. Okay, can you give us a very brief response, please, Heather?
I was going to say something very similar to that we need to keep the remits of over the meeting safe. It's not to say these aren't questions that shouldn't be asked, but perhaps in different rooms. I did want to say that we have been. What makes me feel more assured is that we are getting support now around modelling, to understand what our kind of demand is, but it's without a doubt, it's a nationally recognised issue that the demand on children's services is becoming more complex. Sometimes the numbers aren't greater, but the complexity is, and that's where the cost comes in. So we're ahead of that. We've got plans in place to work through. That's what we've been trying to focus in on with our transformation focus, rather than doing the whole thing in the first year, trying to do that way around. So it's feeling more, I'm feeling more assured that we know what our problems are. So I think elsewhere we can talk about the how we translate that knowledge into delivery. if that's all right with you, Richard.
Yeah, so
And Chair.
I think there's a general concern about the I suppose the robustness of the control environment within children's services in particular, and I think that's something that the committee probably will want to spend more time looking at in future. So I'm going to leave that there for now. Thank you for giving us the information, Richard. Can I ask all members just to come back to the recommendations on page 3 of the agenda pack, which are to note the progress against the key and the improvement recommendations in the 2022-3 audit. I'm assuming that the outstanding actions will continue to be reported to us at the next and subsequent meetings. So we'll keep monitoring these until eventually they are resolved. Members happy to note? Yeah. I don't think there's any need to vote formally, is there? No, that's fine. Okay, I'm going to move on to item 6, which is the interim external auditors report for 2022-3, which starts on page 21 of the supplement. So, Nicola, would you like to kick us off?
I'll kick off, and then I'm sure Barry will come in after me. So this is the following on from the last item. This is the annual auditors report for 23-24, which is the period, just for clarity, up to the period of the 31st of March 24. So the auditors report includes a summary of findings and recommendations, which are accompanied by the proposed management response and planned actions. So just for the committee's awareness, this report and action plan and management responses have been through the executive leadership team before coming before this committee today. As written in the executive summary on the first page, you'll see the report includes 2 statutory recommendations in relation to serious concerns over the financial sustainability. These are detailed on point 7. So we've picked them out of the Grant Thornton report and included them in the body of the report. The detail of the recommendation made, the action that management have taken to date, and also then what the planned actions are. So members will note that once this has been through the committee cycle, we will then formulate the action plan to come to audit committee for monitoring, much like the 22-23 is going through the committee cycle. So in relation, it not only includes 2 statutory recommendations, it includes 9 key recommendations and 8 improvement recommendations addressing the perceived weaknesses. The report is to inform members of the background, framework and next steps to ensure the external auditor's recommendations are addressed promptly and satisfactorily. You will see in table in the paragraph 3, it shows there's an increase in the overall number of recommendations between the 22 and 23 auditors reports. So we've clearly laid that out in the covering report, so that transparency is there around the position. With this report, if the auditor makes either a public interest report or a recommendation Schedule 7 of the 2014 Act, it requires the local authority to consider it within a month of receipt and decide whether the report requires the authority to take any action or whether the recommendation is to be accepted, and 3, what if any, action to take in response to the report or recommendation. As the external auditors have made 2 statutory recommendations, this report will need to be considered by full council, which is on the agenda for the 12th of February 2025, for a decision on whether to accept the statutory recommendations and what action to take in response to it. Happy to take any questions, but obviously Barry may want to add.
Before we do, 2 things. No, number 1, can everyone just check that the mics are off, because there's a little bit of feedback in the room. So just check that your mics are not still open. Otherwise, it does give us a bit of a ringing noise. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is I'm going to bring Maria in before I bring Barry in. So Maria.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on the escalation of the number of recommendations that have been made by the external auditors. and also the escalation in type of recommendation that's been made by the external auditors. You'll note that we have 2 statutory recommendations that we haven't ever had here before. There are a number of there are more key recommendations made, as well as more improvement recommendations made. And just so everyone's clear, we'd like a report that doesn't have any recommendations made. That's where we're trying to get to, where as part of our financial sustainability, governance, improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness that the external auditors report on in terms of our value for money, it's important that we are satisfying all of these and we see that we have greens across the board.
Okay, Barry.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll do a brief introduction and then I'll hand over to Dan to take you through a little bit more of the detail of the report. Just by way of introduction, this does state it's an interim auditor's annual report. The reason that it's an interim auditor's report is because we need to conclude on the financial statements audit. We'll cover that off in the next item on the agenda, but the substance of this report will not change. It will just be updated to reflect that the financial statements audit will be concluded hopefully on the 27th of February. I must also acknowledge and thank you for those contributors that have said that this has been a useful report. I would acknowledge that it's also a very long and detailed report, and it does go through a number of some very difficult and challenging messages for the council to respond to. As Nicola and Maria have referenced, this does look at the period ending the 31st of March 2024, so some 10 months ago. We have tried to update that where it's relevant with the latest information, but inevitably things have moved forward significantly over the last 10 months. So we will pick up that progress that's been made and inevitably the actions that have been taken in response to our recommendations as part of the 24-25 review that will commence early in the new municipal year. As Maria's acknowledged, we have made a number of statutory recommendations. These are rare. They're becoming increasingly less rare, unfortunately, in the local government community. But again, they are significantly important, and that's why we've raised those, and those are being considered by full council. And again, we will be present at full council to ensure that the full council members have opportunity to ask us any questions in relation to the report, should that be necessary. In addition, you will note in the appendix to the report, we agreed with the council and management team that we would undertake a deep dive of the social and children care, adults and children's social care budgets, as this was identified as a particular area of concern and a key driver in the overspends of the council. We then sought to elevate those recommendations and incorporate them where we can within the main recommendations. This was quite a long and complex report to write, and again, I acknowledge the efforts of management as well as Dan in trying to navigate this through. So I appreciate that it's some 100 pages long. It was significantly longer when it was presented in draft. So we have managed to consolidate that down. Chair, if I may, I'll bring in Dan just to give you a high-level summary of the key findings and recommendations before questions.
Yeah, Dan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I think as Nicola's referred to, we've made a range of recommendations across all 3 areas of the value for money code. That's financial sustainability, governance, and arrangements to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness. In terms of the key headlines, if I could just go through perhaps the key recommendations and headlines in each of them 3 areas. In terms of financial sustainability, that's where the 2 statutory recommendations have landed. The first one is that the council should develop a detailed savings plans to deliver the saving targets in the medium-term financial strategy, and that's really important to reduce the council's reliance on one-off resources and to ensure that budgets are rebased really to a financially sustainable level going forwards. The second statutory recommendation is about developing that overarching transformation business case. We understand the urgency of needing to deliver savings and the implementation of the workforce savings programme. But really, it is critical that overarching transformation business case is developed, and also some of these enabling business cases for individual project streams, along with the funding, how they're actually going to be funded. So they're the two statutory recommendations that require a full council response. In addition, we've raised 4 key recommendations under financial sustainability. And they cover a variety of areas, some of which were referred to last year. We think that it is important to mitigate the risk of implementing the service restructure, the workforce savings, before the development of the transformation programme. So we've raised that as a key recommendation, and we've spoken a little bit about that earlier in this committee. We've also raised a key recommendation on strengthening some of the budget, I think particularly some of the modelling and forecasting processes within children's services in terms of setting the budget and forecasting demand. Oversight of the commercial property portfolio, and particularly a bit more detailed performance monitoring on an individual asset basis, and then continuing to develop mitigating actions to reduce the dedicated schools grant deficit, which again isn't unique to this council. It is a national issue, but certainly the trajectory of the cumulative deficit on the DSG compared to the council's reserves is a cause for some concern. All of these recommendations are made in the background, that the council does have significant budget pressures, largely driven by social care and demand-led services. There are significant budget gaps in the medium-term financial plan, which won't be resolved through what you might call normal budget setting processes. They do require sort of widespread transformation that the council is embarking on, and that significant reliance on one-off reserves, which isn't sustainable and knocks the issue really into future years, with the reliance on reserves and the exceptional financial support. I say from the government, it isn't actually additional money from the government. The exceptional financial support means that the council can use its own resources in terms of borrowing and capital receipts to fund some revenue expenditure. I think that's the background against it. I think we would recognise, the council clearly has reported and recognises the financial challenges that it faces. It is engaged early with Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, as was in the year of audit, and with ourselves as external auditors in highlighting these challenges and declaring the financial emergency. But that is the background in which we raise our financial sustainability recommendations. Perhaps a bit briefer, we've raised 4 key recommendations in governance. Some of the highlights there is about embedding a organisation-wide system of internal control, and that's really based on the work of internal audit, and the council has a robust internal audit service, but they gave a limited assurance opinion for 23-24. There were a large number of limited or no assurance reviews in some key areas, for example financial controls, and we noted some delays in implementing their recommendations. So we've made that key recommendation, and also one about reviewing close down processes to ensure the council can publish its accounts in accordance with statutory deadlines. So they're the key ones for governance. And then we've already spoken, I think, about economy, efficiency and effectiveness. We made a key recommendation around procurement and contract management arrangements. So Chair, I think they're the key headlines, but happy to take any questions or detail.
Thanks, Dan. Before we go over to questions, I just want to say a couple of things if I could do, because this was always going to be a very difficult year for the new council, bringing together five organisations into one, new finance system, huge backlog of outstanding audit. So one of the things that I reflected on when reading the report, and perhaps might have taken this a little bit personally, Dan, but I don't think there's necessarily enough reflection of the progress that has been made so far, and some of the structural challenges which the council faced. Particularly, we've already heard about the cost pressures in the budget. We've also got the other side of the equation, which is the underlying structural under delivery of council tax versus similar authorities, which is a structural issue for this council and has been now for many years. So I guess my challenge back to you was around whether this fairly reflected some of the progress that has been made. I noted Barry's statement beforehand that where things have been updated, that they will be reflected. But for me, it feels like there have been a huge number of achievements so far this year in clearing us of the prior year audits and giving us some assurance over those opening balances, which is absolutely critical to the ongoing work and assurance that this committee can deliver. The other thing is that this is a snapshot in time, essentially. So we've already made quite a lot of progress against some of the things that have been made. So I guess those were my challenges in reading the report. It is a very comprehensive report. I recognise the issues that you've raised. Absolutely, there are lots of things that we need to put right, but there are some things which effectively are beyond our control, such as the need for external exceptional financial support from third parties, i.e. government. So I think I'd like us all to reflect on the fact that although this looks like a very colourful report and it looks very bleak, lots of progress has been made outside of this audit, and I feel that we're headed in the right direction in lots of areas, although there will still be some challenges. So I just wanted to say that before we open up to questions. So I had Liz had a hand up, I think Will, Habib, Diogo. Yeah, okay, that's enough for now before I forget.
Thank you. I just wanted to take the opportunity, whilst I understand how challenging this was as a read for somebody in my position, for my colleagues on executive, for the chair of audit as well, of course. I just wanted to thank Grant Thornton, though, for giving us a report that is clear, coherent, and I believe constructive, and sets us on the right journey of what we need to achieve as this council over the next year. It has been an incredibly challenging time to go through local government reorganisation. I'm sure I put some graphs together at home for my own use of interest rates and inflation, and I put a red dot where the Secretary of State agreed that Somerset would go to one authority. And then I put a red dot at vesting day. And the difference in both inflation and interest rate, one was down here on the Somerset moors and levels, and the other one was at the highest point of the Mendips. It was quite stark. And then I added in a bar chart of where the COVID grants came in. And of course, we fell off the cliff edge of COVID grants at exactly the same time. But I do genuinely mean my thanks to Grant Thornton, because it has obviously been a massive amount of work to put this report together in such a coherent form. And I am really looking forward to Sian's work on how the progress from 22-23 is absorbed into 23-24, and how we see the progress reports coming forward for audit. And I did reference that progress report at Corporate and Resources Scrutiny yesterday, where there were lots of questions about transformation. And whilst I normally try to keep audit and scrutiny separated as they need to be, I think there is some overlap here with the work that Sian will do on the progress report that will be helpful right across the whole council. So my genuine thanks, and thank you, Chair, for your indulgence.
No, thank you. I didn't mean to be overly critical there, Barry. It is a very good report, but I guess I was saying things a bit personally. Gwyl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh dear, I sometimes feel like we're plunging down a slope, and every now and again we're able to grab a branch and hang on, and then the branch gives way, and then we carry on our hurtling descent. And this seems to be this is what I got from reading the report: statutory recommendations 1 and 2. Actually, all the recommendations, the key ones and the statutory ones, all feed into each other, because I think, and this was referenced yesterday in the audit about transformation and things, we're almost in a situation where we're having to eat ourselves to keep alive. And so first question I want to ask is that will the current target operating model that we're developing at the moment, is it still going to be fit for purpose in 2029-30? Because the clear indication from this audit report is that we are going to have to make further cutbacks, and further cutbacks are going to damage our ability to run the business, and so the spiral will go on. And as Councillor Leyshon pointed out at audit yesterday, at scrutiny yesterday, there are 4 main factors affecting where we are at the moment, and only one of them is within our control, and that is limited to the amount of money we can actually burn off from commercial sales or from the reserves, and everything else is in the gift of government. So apologies for being the Eeyore in the room. I'm also taking on board the implementation of the staff reduction plan, perhaps being slightly out of kilter with transforming the council and its services. And that, I think that was referenced in one of the public questions. I'm not going to go on for too long. The other points I picked up on are the insufficient information across commercial property disposals that the auditor has picked up in a key recommendation, the higher needs block, the better internal control, which is clearly within our gift and we can work very hard on, improving financial systems, and the complaints from the Ombudsman I mentioned earlier on. So there are lots of things we can do. What I'm not entirely convinced about is whether they will have sufficient impact to provide us with another branch next year as we continue our slip down the slope. Sorry.
No, that's fine, Gwyl. So I'm going to ask Alan to come in on the target operating model, and then I'm going to ask Maria to come in on the financial sustainability question.
Thank you, Chair. I think first and foremost, in relation to the operating model, we set out some, as members will know, we set out some design principles that have informed every step of our programme so far through this year. And as was responded to in the question, we really set out that agenda quite clearly at executive back in January of 2024, and the nature and the steps we needed to take to make sure we were sustainable. The operating model essentially will drive how services are delivered. But at every point where there is a change in service standard or a change in activity, clearly we need to brief and ensure that where appropriate, those are member decisions. But the intention is to try and use, wherever possible, new systems, new operating models to be able to reduce the requirement for detailed staff engagement on a number of repetitive tasks. So we're using staff to really add value to the work that they are doing, and making sure it's focused in the right places. The intent of the operating model is to put us on that journey. What's really clear, certainly from my perspective within the report from Grant Thornton, is that there is a need for further savings to be identified, a further transformation programme. We have identified so far that as part of the workforce programme, because that was part of our initial response that we could deal with the issues that we had. It was the most controllable aspect of our spend. However, what's really clear moving forward is we need to change how we operate. We need to change the activities that we do, and that's really where the operating model is intended to direct us. And as part of that, that's why we need to develop that next round of transformation, so that we have, not for the financial year coming, but the financial year after that, we have that clear understanding of the activities that we will potentially be recommending to stop, and that's a matter for members for decision, but also those that we would choose to transform in some way, shape or form, be the use of technology in some way, shape or form, working with partners to deliver that differently, or consider how we can deliver it more efficiently. So I hope that helps, Chair.
Maria.
I think it's important to recognise that there's a lot of work to be done here in order to move completely into green. The external auditors have also given us some balance within this report. So if members have read the sections on page 51 and 52, where the auditors make reference to us being in a green assessment around financial plans, finances to support the sustainable delivery of services in accordance with the strategic and statutory priorities, ensures its financial plan is consistent with other plans such as workforce capital investment and other planning, which may include working with other local public bodies as part of a system. And one other that I'm going to draw out, because I think it's helpful in terms of foundations, approaches and carries out its annual budget setting process. These three have got greens from the external auditors, which give us a good foundation in terms of building from to move to that financially sustainable position. We need to work collectively to ensure that we have either additional income that's coming in, we have additional funding that comes in, or indeed council tax in terms of moving to a financially sustainable position. We have to manage our growth and pressures as an organisation. It's something that you'll hear me say in a number of other committees in order to move there. And it's very clear, and we have recognised this ourselves, even before the external auditors provide this report, that there needs to be further transformation of the council. That doesn't necessarily mean just cost cutting, that means changing the way we do things in order to achieve significant savings, in order to balance the budget in a sustainable way. And I'm conscious of the internal control environment being the committee's remit. So I'm just going to come back to, this report has been issued by the external auditors. It will need to go on to council because it's got 2 statutory recommendations. However, we've got until the end of March, and then the auditors will be writing their new report for 24-25. So some of the things that the chair has mentioned in terms of the good progress that we might have made in 24-25, it's not going to be reflected in this report because this report is all about 23-24. But it is incumbent on all of us to ensure that we're taking those big leaps forward for 24-25 so that we can close some of these recommendations off with audit assurance. So the next year's report, actually, I'd like it to have no recommendations in, but I think that might be a tall order. We need to have very little that comes through because we're making that significant progress and we can demonstrate it from an evidence base.
Well, I'm just going to limit follow-ups for a second. So I've got Diogo and Habib, and then I'll bring you back in if there's time. Diogo?
Thanks, Chair. Just looking at the statutory recommendations, really, is probably what I'll focus on here. One of the comments earlier in the report, I think it was, or perhaps it was the presentation, the appendix, the council's not moving quickly enough to develop a pipeline of savings, etc., etc. I think it's just a common theme, I think, for us as councillors, that the council doesn't move fast enough or as fast as we'd like to on a number of issues, not just in finance, whether it's planning or answering the phones to our customers or whatever it is. So I think that's a common theme that we as councillors notice. On statutory recommendation 1, I'm just confused when I read it, and I perhaps appreciate the auditor's comments or views here, because you've made a number of recommendations, and this is looking at the report, Nicola, that you put together. And then when I look at the proposed management response, a lot of it is saying we've been doing X, we carry on doing Y, we'll do a bit more of Z, but we're doing a lot of it already. And so whether it's just the timing of the way that things work out, I don't know. But I'm just confused because the council in response are saying we're already doing everything, but your recommendation perhaps suggests otherwise. So I really just want some clarity. Perhaps I've missed something completely being new to the audit committee. And there is one element that is missing in my view, on bullet point 3 of the statutory recommendation in the council's report about managers having sufficient skills. Although the council has mentioned it in their proposed management response towards the end, saying the council will provide a programme of appropriate training, in the planned action, there is nothing in there about providing that training. And so I think that that's been missed from the actions as has been recommended by the auditors. So there's 2 elements there, and then I've got just one thing on statutory 2.
Okay, so picking up the second bit first, so around the training elements, management happy to accept that?
There's an expectation that all budget managers will be trained again so that they understand what is expected of them. You will have heard me speak in scrutiny committees and in executive where it's important that every budget manager stays within their budget and understands the financial implications of any budgetary decisions, business decisions that they're making. And the expectation is that where services have got forecast overspends, that mitigation plans will be implemented to bring back their forecast overspend back to a balanced budget. That might be incredibly hard for some areas, but it is an expectation. No one has permission to spend money that they do not have. And we've included those mitigating tables within the monthly reports that are publicly seen. So I think while the council has a process in place that we accept is how we're moving forward, fundamentally what we're talking about is increased savings, increased income to move to a financially sustainable position. And at the committee yesterday, you will have heard me say it's incredibly challenging to move from an £81 million one-off in the budget for 24-25 and suddenly remove all of that and deal with the pressures that have come in. But that is what we're working on, and we are liaising with government regarding exceptional financial support, as you are all aware. I'm conscious that's not the remit of this committee. I provide that for context to understand what we are doing in our financially challenging position, and we accept that the external auditors have identified exactly what I can see as a Section 151 officer, because we're not in a sustainable position at the moment. So I wouldn't expect the external auditors to have said anything different. We're completely aligned on that. But as an organisation, officers and members, we are all on board since the financial emergency was declared in November 23 to turn this council into a financially sustainable council as quickly as we can. However, that won't be overnight, as much as I would have liked it to have been.
Diego, did you want further clarification and assurance from the external auditors?
Yeah, just on the comments, but also just as an audit committee member, the recommendation that was made was picked up in the management response, but not in the actions. So whether it should also be in the action as it's in the response.
I think that's accepted. Yeah. Barry, are you happy to provide some assurance?
Yeah, so I think in reference to the earlier comment around the progress that's being made, we'll obviously start looking at that as soon as the 24-25 review commences. Now, one thing that we're keen to do is try to make sure that we have a more timely production of this audit report, because quite frankly, coming to you in January, which is 10 months after the year end, is not helpful to you and doesn't give you that assurance. So we will be working hard to make sure with officers that we can follow up the progress that's being made and give that fresh review. As Maria and the chair have highlighted, this was a new council, so this is the report and the report card at the end of its first year of operation. So we would hope that by the end of year 2, the report card will be better and will demonstrate the progress that's been made. But we will continue to be that critical challenge and friend, if I dare say that, as well in looking at those arrangements that have been, and the progress made.
Okay, Alan, did you want to briefly add something?
Really quickly, Chair, I think just to reassure members, and without kind of committing heresy here, the transformation programme moving forward isn't all about the money. It's about how we ensure that the council develops and we address all of the issues that we know we need to consider as part of the next step. So we've had that peer review in order to assess that. So workforce training and development is a critical part of our transformation programme, but completely accept that we need to be more explicit in the statement. But to reassure members of committee, absolutely training development of our staff moving forward as we go into this financial and future financial years will be critical on all aspects, leading from management to financial acuity and all the aspects you'd expect. Thank you, Chair.
Habib.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll be glad to know that my question is almost as similar as Councillor Rodriguez and is based on delivery, because we understand managers potentially have insufficient skill sets, but how are we going to deliver that is the most important thing. Quick enough for you?
Very good. Will.
Very briefly, as I referenced and has been referenced before, we are dependent very heavily on government decisions in relation to bringing us forward. bearing in mind that this is the latest audit of information available to external eyes, how much attention do you think they're paying to this document? And how crucial is it? Because with 2 statutory recommendations in it, it might attract attention.
I'm going to bring Maria in because she's got good national oversight here.
I'm going to quote our external auditor because he's absolutely right. They used to be extremely rare. I hadn't seen the statutory recommendation. However, they are becoming more frequent and more common now. The key recommendations and improvement recommendations that we've received all tie in to those statutory recommendations. It's a reflection of where we are and that we need to move forward. And I would hope that the next report that we see here for 24-25 and in future years doesn't have these sorts of recommendations in it. But that is incumbent on us moving the council forward, which will require transformation, the changing of lots of things, and the making of savings, increased income. And that will require some tough decisions that we're going to need to make to move to a financially sustainable position. But I believe that everyone from officers to members are all on board with that trajectory, and we just need to move with it at pace.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I just wondered whether this report would play any role in government decisions in relation to exceptional financial report. I do understand we're all in the same boat. We're all working towards the same aim here. I don't have any doubt about that at all. It's just that we are dependent on external funding decisions, and I just wondered how much attention the department would pay to a report like this, bearing in mind that it's nearly almost a year old, and that we are making progress.
In the public reports, not just the external auditors reports, but in the public reports that I write as part of my responsibility, and in the conversations with government, following on from the previous Section 151 officer, we've made it categorically clear that without exceptional financial support, the council would be in a Section 114 territory. What our external auditors are saying here is you're not financially sustainable, which we know and we need to address. They're playing that out in their report in terms of a reflection. So what I'm saying to you is government already know, and that's why we are an exceptional financial support authority as part of the 24-25 budget, because if they didn't provide that support, we would have been in an extremely challenging situation, and Section 114 is part of where you get to if you can't be financially sustainable. So I'm trying to be as clear as I can in the reports that get produced so that we're all clear about the trajectory, but I am confident that we have the support to move forward. What I'm not confident about is how quickly we can turn it around. I'd like it to move even quicker.
Okay. Right. Final question on this item, Diogo.
Thank you, Chair. Just for reassurance again, really quickly, on recommendation 2, it does finish saying that this should be undertaken at pace. I know Maria's mentioned that about working at pace already, which is good. One of the criticisms earlier on, or one of the challenges early on, was that they said the council has not moved quickly enough to develop a pipeline of saving plans, etc., etc. The planned actions for recommendation 2, the target date is 30th of June 2025. What I just want to know is some reassurance that, bearing in mind the criticism about the council not moving at pace earlier on in the report, is the 30th of June 2025 moving at pace, considering that's 5 months from today's date, really? I just want some clarity and some reassurance for us, please.
So we've set that date. The organisation is already working on transformation. As I said in the previous committee, we are still working on additional savings that are not quite robust to go into the budget. Until they're robust, I won't allow them in the budget. So we have to keep working on them. We know that we've got a budget gap for the entire MTFS period, medium-term financial strategy period. So we have to identify further savings or have additional income. With a potential multi-year settlement, we might know where we are in the future, but fundamentally the transformation programme has to be increased in order to help us meet those challenges. That doesn't mean that we work to the 30th of June. That means that if we don't have it ready by the 30th of June, we're already recognising that we can't achieve what we need to during the year in order to move to that 26-27 balanced position. So I think that's the latest date that we can have it available. And there may be smaller transformations all amalgamate as part of a bigger transformation programme. I don't envisage just one transformation programme moving forward, but I do envisage one governance structure, one way of doing things, one reporting mechanism, so that we're all consistent across the board, so that governance and process actually has a standard that is set across the organisation that everyone has to meet in terms of the transformation. And from a financial perspective, we'll be looking at business cases, whether they stack up, what return on investment is, why are we doing this, where is the financial saving, cashable saving, where is it cost avoidance, and if it's not delivering anything, why are we doing it? We're in a financially challenging position. Those should be the priorities in how we're moving forward.
Thanks, Maria. So hopefully we've given that a good enough kick of the tyres in terms of members' questions. We need to move on now. So are members happy to note the recommendations, both the statutory and the key recommendations from the auditors and the management responses? Everyone happy? Yeah. Okay. Obviously, as we move towards full council, so Grant Thornton will be in attendance at full council. I'm assuming that you're happy to take email questions or conversations from the committee offline, Barry. Yeah, fine. Okay, so moving on to item 7, which is the final accounts update, which is a verbal update on the external audit for 2023-4. Barry?
Thank you, Chair. I thought I'd start by throwing some statistics out for you, because I know you like those, saying how many accounts were signed off. So as at the backstop date of the 13th of December, some 45% of local authorities had an unmodified or clean audit opinion. And as you're right, Chair, that did include all of those audits that were the predecessor authorities.
10 audits.
So that's really good. So again, but that does demonstrate the situation's significant challenge that we've got as far as delivering audits across the country. Now, as you know, the 23-24 accounts were significantly impacted by the late delivery. I'm pleased to say that the accounts were delivered in advance of the absolute backstop to enable the public inspection period to commence. So they were provided to us on the 15th of January. That then enabled the public inspection period to commence, and that will end on the 27th of February. I think you'll appreciate and agree that it would be unrealistic for us to do any real substantive work on those financial statements now that we've received them, and so we are moving into a backstop position, and a backstopped audit opinion will be issued on or after the 27th of February, once those accounts have been accepted and approved. We have provided some comments back to management and officers that they may want to incorporate in those versions of the accounts, but we're not undertaking an audit per se. That said, there has been, as you can tell, a significant amount of audit resources come through or devoted already to the audit. So whilst the full-scale fee won't be payable in that year, for the year, a large amount of that will be payable because of the work that we've done. Now, the backstop doesn't mean that we can't regain assurance. So we are currently in conversations within the sector as to what we can do so that we can move to a position of an unqualified audit opinion going forward. Now, Somerset is a fairly unique position. It's not on its own, but it's one of a very small number of authorities where you don't have those qualifications over the opening balances going back a couple of years. So we are looking to see whether it is possible to regain assurance in the 1 year of 24-25. Now, that will effectively mean us doing almost a full audit of the 23-24 accounts and the 24-25 accounts at the same time. That's a significant burden on both ourselves and on officers. And we're even then not sure whether we will get the assurance that we need. And so we are in discussions with our regulator, the FRC, SIPFA, the National Audit Office, and all other local firms to see whether or not we can get to that position. Those discussions are ongoing. We are not going to commit to anything and devote further resources and potentially use council funds if we're not going to get to that desired position. But it's frustrating for all of us that we're not in that position to be able to determine that. But as far as the 23-24 accounts are concerned, Those have been prepared. So again, a great thank you to your officers in actually doing that, because I'm aware of many others where that isn't the case. So you have done that, but we won't be issuing an audit opinion. And one final figure, because I know you like them, Chair, the number of 23-24 audits delivered by the end of December, out of 459 bodies, 49 were delivered. So again, that indicates where we are in relation to the local audit market. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, so let's start with the good bits first. So I would like to thank Grant Thornton for their continued work in helping to close down audits. I'm aware that lots of other firms aren't quite as diligent in pursuing closure of older accounts. So for the work that you've done over the last 18 months in getting us to this position, I think we need to recognise that we've climbed Everest in that respect. We haven't quite got to the summit, but I think we've made as much progress as anyone could possibly have made under the circumstances. So as much as it's pointing not to get to a position where we could have a full audit for 23-4, I think we have to recognise we are where we are. 49 out of 400 odd councils have been able to deliver this. Of those 49 councils, the number have been through local government reorganisation, I would suspect, is 0. So, you know, I don't think we can necessarily beat ourselves over the head with this, but my concern now is how we get back on track in terms of delivering assurance back to taxpayers, which is what we're here to do. So in terms of that plan, you outlined in December a proposal. Am I now sensing that that's been pushed back further? We're not going to be able to progress with the limited number of audits that you had outlined might be possible, and then we're just going to move straight into I guess it's the fourth. I'm going to get the numbers wrong now. I can't remember which year we're on. We'll be moving into the 4-5 audit? Yeah. Okay.
That's right, Chair. We are undertaking limited work that will have value and help address the gap in assurance that we have, but pretty much the team that we had allocated has now been reallocated elsewhere. We are keen to make sure that we get to regaining that assurance and provide that to yourselves and to the stakeholders in Somerset. It's going to be a big task, whichever way. And again, I think looking at doing 2 audits, I'm not sure. I look at Grace. Well, I'm not looking at Grace because I don't want to look at her face, to be honest with you. But that's a big ask for their side.
It's all right. She's smiling, so you're all right.
But you can't see Nikki's face, can you? So we'll see where we end up. We will keep Audit Committee updated. The key pressure, and I will say this, is the council must ensure that it produces its 24-25 accounts by the deadline. Now that has been extended by 1 month to the end of June. So again, we're working with officers. You've got a statement of accounts now. That gives you a hard and a straight line upon which to start preparing those accounts. But the 30th of June is now scarily only 5 months away. So there's a lot of work to be done. And that's the starting point.
So my next question, Nicola, and whether we're going to be in a position to meet that deadline around the production of the 4-5 draft accounts.
I could have predicted that question was coming to me. So yes, I believe, working with Ben as head of corporate finance, that we will be in a position to deliver those accounts. We're already in discussions around, is there any extra capacity that we will need short term in the team to be able to deliver on that, and just to make sure that we do get out of that backstop position in a quicker time period, because actually the cost of resourcing the extra team will be far better than the cost of the extended audit.
Thank you. I guess reflecting on the problems we've had previously with closed down accountants in particular, have we got the right level of resource in the team to be able to get to where you need to get to?
So I think it has been recognised that producing the 11, not 10, sets of accounts that we had to do did have a significant impact on the team and the loss of that legacy knowledge. We are in a lot stronger position now with the team that we've got in place. They know the system that they're working on. One of our chief accountants actually built one of the modules that is FAR fixed asset module on there with our suppliers. So actually, I think we are in a lot stronger position, but in order to give them the capacity they need for the 2 years worth of audits as well, and making sure we've got everything in place. So that's where I'm just looking at that extra little bit of capacity that might be needed. But I am confident in the team that Ben's got working with him.
Can you keep us updated if there are any bumps or wrinkles along the way in terms of our ability to hit that deadline? Because I fully intend to make sure that we hit it.
Of course.
I fully intend that we hit it as well. It's a statutory deadline.
Okay. Members, open to questions or comments? Okay. Fine. I'm going to break for half an hour if everyone's happy, till 2:10. No, one even. So we're going to stop for lunch now. So those people joining online will be back at 1:10. Okay. Thank you. Is the internal audit plan progress report for 2024-5. Alistair, is this you? I'm assuming.
It is, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, so this is the internal audit plan update report. This is to highlight any significant issues that we need to bring to your attention through our work. It's also to highlight where we are with the recommendation tracking. So first of all, if you can turn to agenda page 140, this just gives a summary of where the audit plan is to date. Just picking up on the comments earlier about the external auditor report looking back, whether things are moving in the right direction for 24-25, I would just draw your attention to the recommendation tracking. We are on track to have more internal audit recommendations implemented this year than last year, so that is moving in the right direction and the numbers are stabilised. So you can also pick up there the number of overdue priority 1 actions has also dropped since November, which is a good direction of travel. As I said, I'll just pull out the key points to bring to your attention in this report. The next is just on page 142, and I just want to mention you had an update in November about the strategic risks changing. So this will be the last time you will possibly see the strategic risks laid out like this. I believe there's a paper going to executive on the 3rd of March where the new strategic risks will be agreed, and we will be looking to make sure that our work is realigned to those new strategic risks. Also, again, part of my update to you is to make you aware of any changes to the audit plan. Those are highlighted since your last update on agenda page 144, just so you've got the
Can I just point out there is a difference in page numbering between the ModGov version and the paper agenda pack. So I don't know how we're going to resolve that one in the meeting, but if you want to refer to your swap audit page numbers, that probably makes most sense.
Yep, that's absolutely fine. So it would be our page 5. So this highlights changes to the audit plan. I think the one I would just highlight there, which is going to be quite a large review for us to do, is around the Better Care Fund, and that is a joint audit with the NHS internal auditors. There are also some changes and things that are coming out of the audit plan. Most notably, I've just mentioned supporting families. That's due to the autonomous status that's being rolled out, and it doesn't require internal audit sign-off of those anymore. So just to bring to your attention the significant findings to our work since your last update, and this is on our agenda, on our page 7. And this is children not in schools. So this one was given limited assurance, and obviously it's quite a topical area at the moment, particularly post-COVID with the number of children missing from education. If you look at the summary on page 7, there's not one single fundamental weakness in the system. It was the multiple number of priority 2 recommendations that brought it to limited assurance. The themes that are coming out from this review, there's obviously some work to do to strengthen policy and procedures in this place, but as well as in terms of improving data quality that can feed through to effective performance monitoring as well. And that's what's summarised in that report. So moving on to our page 8, and again, picking this up because this was mentioned earlier in the committee as well around contract management. So the contract management review that we did back in March through to in January through till March 2023 highlighted a limited assurance, and that was brought through into the unitary authority. What we're pleased to say is that the recommendations have been implemented, as you can see from this follow-up report. And just to clarify for members that aren't part of the committee, usually any limited assurance audit that we give, we do work to follow up on those recommendations to give assurance they have been implemented to make sure the control environment is strengthened. You did receive an update in May 2024 on the progress against these recommendations. As I say, this report is now highlighting that they have been implemented. So that is good news. So again, in terms of direction of travel, things are going in the right way. But just to be clear, this was a legacy review based on Somerset Council, and what we had in the plan and what we discussed as an audit committee in May 24 was a larger post-unitary review on contract management, looking at all the contracts post-unitary with all the districts' information coming in and complying with relevant regulations, as well as you requesting that we redo the survey to contract managers to make sure they are aware of their roles and responsibilities of managing those contracts. So that is on our schedule of works to do, and we will be looking to do that shortly. So scrolling on to our page 9, housing, landlord, fire safety. So this one was given limited assurance last year. As you can see from the summary there, the recommendations, all but one, have been implemented. The one that's outstanding is almost there, and hopefully it should be completed by September 25 around the reconciliation process. So we will keep an eye on that outstanding recommendation. As in previous years, we obviously operate a rolling audit plan, so I have drawn a demarcation kind of where our work is going to end at the 31st of March and what pieces of work are going to be pushed into next year's audit plan that I'll be bringing to your committee in March. So you can see that on our page 13 going down to page 14 in terms of the work that we'll be looking to complete. But again, as a committee, what you do need to be aware of is anything that we're intending to remove from the plan, and those are highlighted on agenda page 16. The reason for removing most of these reviews is some of them are contingency based, so they can be removed given that we've picked up additional investigation work and time is compensated. The one I would highlight is the asset management one, because that does come up in SIPFA inspection reviews of local authorities' failures. Excuse me. We have done some work around the disposal arrangements earlier in the financial year, and that was given reasonable assurance on the arrangements and processes you've got in place for that. Asset management, we are looking to break it down into its component parts rather than being a high-level overview. So we will be looking to bring some stuff into 25-26, looking at known areas of weakness. Then finally is our page 23 going down to page 31. So this summarises all the outstanding priority 1 recommendations. I won't provide any update on the children's and adult ones, as I know that you had that in December and the executive directors were available for comment, but I will just give you a brief update on a few of the others that are outstanding. Well, actually saying that, I will just probably talk through PRUs. Just to give a quick update on PRUs, I know good progress has been made in that area. And following a discussion with the executive director, we will be looking to do a full audit on that, not a follow-up audit, but a full re-audit in next year's audit plan. So it's worth mentioning that. I'll draw your attention to the outstanding climate change strategy ones. So obviously part of the role of internal audit is to look at the control and arrangements in place for the delivery of strategies that the authority has agreed. The strategy itself and the ones that relate to these are post or pre-vesting day, so it relates to SCC as the strategy. It was an all-encompassing strategy. It obviously won awards as well for being a very good strategy. I think there was a recognition that the authority is in a very different place and what can be delivered through the climate agenda is under review. So what I would say, if the strategy and the direction of the authority is changing, obviously that will have a potential impact on the recommendations we've made there because they do tie into the existing strategy that was in place. The other one to bring to your attention on our page 27, school condition surveys. So fundamentally, this recommendation has been completed and you did receive a update report from us, a follow update report in May 24. There was one priority 1 that wasn't fully complete, which is highlighted here. I will be discussing this with some of the senior officers in this area because the recommendation is fundamentally complete. What was slightly outside the scope of the recommendation made, but was in the agreed management action, was about having a complete data set of schools in terms of their asset condition. That is a 2-year programme to bring that up to date. So obviously, if we leave this recommendation to follow that programme, it will be outstanding for 2 years. So it might be that we want to close this recommendation down and pop some audit time in for 25-26 to see the progress being made against that programme of updating schools' conditions. The other one to bring to your attention is on agenda page 28, transport budget control and governance. Again, from a governance point of view, probably, and budget point of view, you notice that the budget is broadly on track, which is good news. Again, the recommendation is fundamentally complete, so we are going to be looking to start our follow-up work in that area to be able to close it down. I don't propose talking through any of the other follow-up recommendations that are on there at the moment, the high priority ones, but happy to take questions on the paper from members.
Baker.
Thank you, Chair. Alistair, great report as ever, and thank you to SWAP. Just one question from me. On the children missing education policy, you mentioned it's not been reviewed. This is on your page 7, our page 156. You mentioned it's not been reviewed since January 17, so 8 years ago. Should we have a concern about that? And if it was, if it was updated to date, would the stats be worse or better than they've come out at? Thanks, Chair.
I think from our point of view, we've highlighted it as a weakness, so it is definitely a concern that the Audit Committee should have. In terms of policies and procedures in place, that should be a programme for regular review. In terms of things that change from a legislative point of view, there are some changes in this area that are coming through, I believe, in the Children's Wellbeing Act. So no doubt that will need to be taken into account as part of the review of that policy.
Alistair, can I just ask you a more overarching question, if that's all right? Obviously, last year the full internal audit report audit opinion was limited assurance. Do you feel like we're headed in the right direction to recover from where we were? What sort of progress are you expecting to see? What milestones would you like to see in terms of recovering that assurance?
I think through the work we've done in 24-25, the direction of travel is definitely the right direction, which is good to see. In terms of pulling the opinion together, there are 1 or 2 pieces of work that I'd like to wrap up to shape, and that's some quite key areas, to be honest. But I will try and lay out in the opinion report the key fundamental areas that are weak, if they fall into my opinion, to make it a little bit clearer for members, if that's okay. It will probably be based around our healthy organisation themes, so I'll highlight some of the weaknesses that are under there. So in terms of my opinion for this year, I would say it's too early for me to say at the moment, but direction of travel
I didn't want to put you on the spot. I just want what I want to know is that we're headed in the right direction, and if we're not headed there fast enough, what levers can we pull in order to get to where we need to be?
I think from my point of view, from an internal control point of view, stability certainly helps control. Obviously, local government isn't in a place of stability anyway, given the complex with going to a unitary status from Somerset's point of view adds an additional area of complexity. But a stable workforce allows the kind of cross-cutting controls, the things that officers should know, what they should be doing, particularly around maybe contract standing orders, financial regulations. Those things can then start being embedded and making sure officers are following it. So from my point of view, trying to get as much stability into the organisation that allows controls to be embedded, and also making sure that there's clarity on policy and procedure and everyone has the right training and awareness to help feed into that.
So are there dangers, given the obviously the staffing restructure, that the internal control environment starts to slide backwards? Are we likely to see slippage, particularly against some of the priority 1 actions that are still outstanding? Do you have specific concerns in that direction?
Try and make sure that all service directors are aware of the outstanding priority 1 recommendations in their area. So we try and make sure that we liaise with also the officers that are responsible for delivering that, so stuff shouldn't fall off the radar. Changes in staff will always have an impact potentially on internal control, and if someone new is coming in doesn't fully understand the role that they're fulfilling and the controls they're expected to do, that's where sometimes weaknesses can come. So yes, in an ideal world, from my point of view, if the structure is rolled out as soon as possible, that would certainly strengthen, from my point of view, a control environment. I appreciate there will always be change year after year, as was mentioned earlier, by the external auditors, the financial pressures the authorities facing. There is always going to have to be transformational change going on, and what that potentially means for the resourcing structure.
Thank you. Maria?
If I can just come in just to add to what Alistair has already said, I think it's important that when services are being run and when day-to-day business is happening, that we're following the governance framework that we have, that we ensure that there's segregation of duties, that policies and procedures are up to date, that everyone follows the governance structure that's in place. I would expect internal audit to be going in to look at various different areas, and some of those areas are going to be areas that we're worried about or that we're carrying risk in. So we won't always see satisfactory or reasonable assurance in all these areas, but it's incumbent on the service area to start to implement the recommendations as soon as they're identified, even before the report's written, because internal audit will be feeding back as part of that. And I've tried to demonstrate, I think we've had some demonstrations of where that's taken place quite successfully, where a risk priority 1 recommendation has been highlighted. It still formulates part of the assurance that the internal audit team will give, so it may still be limited or nil assurance, but the fact that it's been implemented even before the report's issued gives the internal auditors the opportunity to come back in, check and say whether the assurance that they can now give following on has been closed off, and it doesn't appear on that outstanding list that we're constantly tracking. I also think any risk priority ones that are outstanding need to be implemented as soon as possible with audit assurance, so that we're all comfortable that that internal control environment that we've been carrying for a while, where there are weaknesses, have now been rectified. I'm not going to prejudge Alistair's annual internal audit opinion, because it's not for me to prejudge, that's for Alistair to reach his opinion. But those are the steps that I would add to what Alistair's already said that would help us as an organisation move in the right direction. The question is, how quickly can we move in the right direction and get to that reasonable assurance again?
Thanks, Maria. I've got a little queue now. So I've got Diogo, I've got Quill, I've got Simon.
Just quickly from me, Chair, and Maria touched on it just at the end, her last few words, which is following on from what you were saying. Obviously, direction of travel is good with limited insurance side of things. I think we'd gasp if it was the other way around. So we were expecting it to be in the right direction. So that's great. But the comment, or the additional part of your question was the pace as well. Obviously, previous reports, we've read about the council being too slow with certain aspects. So the pace in which we're travelling for me is quite a key one, and trying to get your opinion on the pace in particular in which we're moving to kind of improve this section, please.
That's an interesting question in terms of pace. My view is, I think that the level of change going on in the staffing structure is having an impact on pace, given the comments that we're getting back. Now, that's not to say that things aren't happening, but it could be happening quicker. In my view, I think there are some areas that feel slightly too slow, particularly on some of the recommendations where 90% of it will get complete, and then there's just 10% to finish it off, and that just then hangs and drags out.
I guess, Diogo, in terms of our oversight of those outstanding actions, now that we can move into that different phase of operation, the plan would be to start calling officers in if there is continued lack of progress, particularly on the priority 1 actions, because these are things that our internal auditors have picked up as high priority areas. I want people to start explaining why they're not being progressed. So the plan is absolutely to start calling people in, so that they understand that audit has teeth in inverted commas, not in an unhelpful way, but we will start holding people to account for their failure to make the required changes and improvements. Quill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bearing in mind that we seem to be getting probably 2 to 3 major flood events a year, plus quite a few minor ones, I do wonder whether the climate change strategy work you've done has encompassed our responsibilities as a lead local flood authority or not, or whether that is covered elsewhere. I see that the SRA is covered, And one of my main concerns is that with the emergence of the SRA, we as a council are putting less resource into our role as local flood authority and tending to devolve it to them, which of course have limited resources. But I don't know whether that's been picked up in an audit at all, or whether it's covered by any of the existing work that's going on.
So the climate change work didn't include the flood response. It's interesting that has come up in conversations for potential work in 25-26, particularly around flood water management, flood response, and possibly going also into emergency planning aspects as well. So there potentially will be something in 25-26 to look at it in more detail.
That certainly sounds like something that we probably should have more awareness of. Henry, I've just got Simon first, then I'll come to you, okay? Unless you wanted to, is it specifically on flooding? Okay, go ahead.
At scrutiny yesterday, I asked Alan Jones a specific question to which I didn't get a specific answer. And my specific question was, are we going to have enough staff in the flooding department if we cut that staff, which is what the budget is proposing to do? On Sunday, we had a situation where we had to put staff into both Ilminster and Chard at the same time, and we were unable to do it. We had the same problem on the 9th of May 2023, where we had no emergency line, which we do now. Thank you very much for putting it in place. And yet again, we couldn't get the staff to cover the problems across the county. There is no doubt in my mind that climate change has completely changed the weather in Somerset, and that what Will has just talked about, which we actually talked about in the break, and he almost took my words. I am really concerned. Thank you.
Okay, so I won't ask Alan for a specific response because you asked him yesterday at scrutiny, but I think you've reinforced Will's point around the importance of the council's adequacy with respect to response to flooding. Is that fair? Yeah, fine. So I think the direction back to our internal auditors is yes, we definitely think that would be something that would be helpful to look at going forward. Okay, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. Firstly, I'm slightly bemused by the concept of getting 90% down the line and then stalling on the last 10%. I don't understand why that happens, because for me it should be automatic, finish it, get on with it, deal with the next one. So I wonder if you had an explanation as to why things appear to be stalling. And the other concerns are around the school condition survey, because the schools that I have visited in my patch are suffering quite badly in terms of condition. And the SEND budgets and costs are a concern, but I don't see that we're looking at those from your point of view. And the individual health and education care plans and the time they're taking. These are concerns that are coming up in my mailbag from residents. So for me, I need to know whether we are heading in the right direction with those things or not. Thank you, Chair.
Yep. So I can shed light on some of those. So the 90% of the recommendation being complete and then just pushing it over the line. I probably don't have a good enough understanding of why it reaches that point, whether it's changing officers responsible for it or whether it's other work pressures that officers are under to get other stuff done, but I'm only speculating. So in terms of EHCPs, we have done quite a bit of work on audit work on EHCPs, and there's a number of outstanding recommendations that the authority is working through on those. And I think there was quite a broad discussion on that in December when Claire Winter was at this committee. In terms of school condition surveys, as I say, we will look at probably putting an audit programme in for next year to see how that rolling update is going, to see how they're using that information to make sure it's feeding through for proper maintenance and repairs.
on schools, sorry, Chair, through you, particularly on schools, I don't think that information is being used. I think the schools are deteriorating as we speak, and we need to do something before it becomes even more expensive.
What the lead members in the room, so I'm sure she'll take that away, Heather. Thank you. Right. Are there any final questions on the internal audit progress report? Otherwise, I will move on. Members happy to note where we are? Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So moving on to item 9, which is the MFTP Treasury Management Strategy and Policy 25.6, Flexible Use of Capital Receipts 25.6, MLP Policy 24.5 and 25.6. So that's over to Maria, Nicola. Liz.
Nicola. Okay, so as you've just highlighted, these are 3 back. No. I think it just might be the position in the room where I'm sat. If I move it here, will it be better? Is that better? Yeah, I think my head is now blocking the speaker above. So yes, as the chair has just said, this is the Treasury Management Policy, MRP Policy and Flexible Use of Capital Receipts Policies, which are 3 key documents in the budget framework. After you have viewed this paper, the paper will go on to executive and then go on to full council as appendices to the budget setting report for 25-26. If we go through the report just in terms of Treasury Management Strategy, I think the committee may be used to seeing this as a separate report coming forward, but we've incorporated it into the 3 documents together just in order to get your approval today or your comments today to feed that then through into the executive papers. I think probably what I would highlight at this point is that we have taken some feedback already on the information that's received in these reports in terms of it's quite a complex read, even for everyone who's in the finance team, in terms of getting their head around all the integrated elements of all the documents and how it formulates together with the capital programme and the capital strategy. And we are looking at whether we can explicitly make anything in these easier to read. And that may be such as just pulling some of the information out of the written paragraphs and putting it into a table in the report, just so it's for the reader it's easier, and also making references to the other documents it relates to, and so that members can easily see how one bit of information in one of the policies relates to another section of the budget report. So that's something that we are looking at. So if you do see some changes in the reports that go before executive and then on to full council, that's the strategy we've taken in terms of just making it easier for the reader to read. If we just talk about the Treasury Management Strategy that is prepared in accordance with government regulations and the CITFA Treasury Management Code. The primary objective of this is to safeguard public money, followed by maintaining liquidity and achieving optimal returns. We do have Anton Sweet online, who heads up our Treasury Management team. If members have any specific queries in relation to any of the information contained within Appendix A, here he becomes on screen. Another appendix is Appendix B, which is the MRP policy for 24, 25 and 25, 26. And the reason this covers 2 years is you'll remember when we bought or members may recall when we bought the MRP policy last year, it was under the umbrella that the part of our policy was to review the information we had in the detailed spreadsheets for our current MRP policy and all in the information contained within it. And this was because when we inherited all of the district information on the MRP and then assets and asset lives, we did have some information that we needed to go away and extract some of those numbers into a more detailed format. And that's what the team have been working on in terms of taking some of that data and making sure we have got it on a line by line basis. And that's where we have made huge progress in that. I would be honest and say that we do have Somewhere we just don't have the information available, but that would be expected of a council of this size to go back on some things many years that we're in a district council. But I think the main thing is we have made a lot of progress in that area and do have a lot more detailed information now, which I think will be welcome news to our external auditors when they do look at this area of the policy. So that MRP policy sets out our approach we're going to take for 24-25 and for 25-26. And then the final appendix is our capital receipts, flexibility and efficiency strategy, which is about how we propose to fund projects that we can. So this is around government allowing us to use some of our capital money to fund some revenue expenditure that the council will have, and largely members will see that's in relation to some of our transformation activity that we have allowance from government to be able to allocate some of our capital receipts in towards that transformation activity, which would normally be disallowed because you'll know the rules around capital must be spent on capital and revenue on revenue. But that's just a specific policy there. So that's the three documents that are in front of you today. Maria, I and Anton will be happy to take any questions.
So opening the floor to members. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. Just one little one. And you mentioned the PWLB and the criteria around lending and that sort of thing. Is there any scope at all? I've just looked at it. Is there any scope? There's some good rates in amongst there, but is there any scope at all to, or how often do you look at potential refinancing to see if we can get any better rates or stretching stuff out to improve rates for the council? Thank you, Chair.
So the team are constantly looking at what rates are, how rates are changing, and whether our Treasury management advisors are actually their forecasts are actually correct. I mean, any forecast, is more wrong than right. None of us know what's going to happen in the future, but we're tracking the forecast. We're tracking what we think are going to happen with interest rates and borrowing rates. And actually, there are distinct things that happen that cause the market to do some things. We agree through our monthly meetings when we're going to need to take out borrowing with the Treasury management team, and actually agree which sorts of rates we would accept at that point in time. But depending on our cash flow position would drive that. We've not borrowed to our full capital financing requirement. So there is the scope to borrow for what we're going to be spending in our capital programme. It's just about the timing and whether we can hold off until interest rates look better. But that isn't always possible because you have to finance the expenditure.
And can I just come back through you, Chair, and just say, Maria, thanks ever so much for that. Are Arlene Close still your advisors, and you're happy the support you're getting from them?
Yes, they're still our advisors, and I'm happy with the support that we're receiving from them at the moment.
Thank you. So I've got Diogo next, and I've got Tim.
Just say I'm very Nicola, I'm very pro making documents simpler, so thank you. Look forward to seeing that. Just one question on the Treasury management strategy. Out of interest, it may be on a different document, but where on various tables you've got the forecast from 24-25 onwards, this is just more of a general thing, where would you see, like previous years, that you can see that change over, I don't know, previous year or two, and then forward? Is that in a different document?
You wouldn't, because this is a forward-looking document as to what we need our capital financing requirement to be. Fundamentally, what ends up happening is we set the capital programme and we set the agenda, and then the Treasury management, the capital financing requirement is picked up from the borrowing requirement there, and then the affordability of whether we can afford it in terms of the prudential indicators. We don't do a backward-looking view like that, but we do include the current financial year so you can see where we are and how it tracks forward. Anton is on screen and wants to come in.
Yes, I was just going to point out that separate reports for mid-year and full-year outturns on Treasury policy are also required documents by the CIPFA Code. I believe the Audit Committee saw the mid-year outcome in I think it was the December meeting, if my memory serves me correctly, but apologies if it was a different meeting to that. And obviously, those documents remain online for you to be available to you. If not, just email me and I can provide those to you.
Thank you. And the other question I had was on the capital receipts flexibility document. Just out of interest, table, I'm on separate tabs for each appendix. I'm sorry, I'm not on the full report. On the eligible efficiency strategy projects, which is page 2 of my report, you've got on table 1, you've got 3 different kind of projects there, and you've got 2 different figures for 24, 25, 25, 26 on there. I was wondering to know if you could explain the difference and the reason why.
So we set the flexible use of capital receipt strategy back in, and it's gone to council in December. We looked at 24, 25. These are our upper limits. So we're setting an expectation that we would need 40 million capital receipts to finance this expenditure. It kind of takes it out of revenue and moves it into capital so it can get financed that way. For 25, 26, I've thought about the big transformation programme that we need to run in order to become financially sustainable. I've thought about what that might mean in terms of further restructuring that may happen. Who knows what that looks like? So what I've done is I've set the parameters to enable us and set them. We may need to revisit them in terms of if we need to do more in terms of transformation, we need to spend more money on that. But I've set the parameters in terms of what I think is reasonable. And you'll note that I've moved My Life, My Future within it because it was its own transformation programme. And I actually think we should have one transformation item that may break down to financing lots of different things, which we'll explain and account for. But these are kind of upper limits. So what we can't do is breach this and finance something different. And it must be agreed by full council.
Okay, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a question really around inflation. So I had a quick look on page 190, quite a good summary. I think on the first paragraph, it talks about some of the wider international issues, President Trump, etc. Now, this is, sorry, that's getting rather loud. Let's move that to there. My worry is that we've been pushing back the border checks that had to come in due to Brexit again and again and again. Now, most economists say that when they come in, that we're looking at another 10 to 15% inflation spike. I don't notice that in here. Are we assuming that they are just going to be pushing that off forever and ever and ever? At what point do we account for that inflationary spike? Thank you, Chair.
Anton, the genie in the Treasury Management lamp.
I'm going to come in. I'll come in. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. You know, we're going to be estimating whatever happens. I won't respond to the question directly, but any changes in inflation that make anything fluctuate or interest rates, we're going to be tracking and watching and looking at. But I can't respond directly to the question that you've asked because we're not able to answer that question in that way.
I think my point is it is a predictable issue that is on the horizon at some point. So I think we can't ignore it entirely. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Any other questions on this report? If not, I'm going to move us to some resolutions. Do we need to formally adopt all of the documents? So I'm going to take these on block then, and we probably will need a vote to formally adopt them. So can I have a proposer? Simon, seconded. Andy, all those in favour? Yeah. Any abstentions? And anyone voting against? No, perfect. So those are carried. Thank you, officers and team, for that item. Now, before we move on to item 10, which is a confidential item, I would like to ask Scott. We have had some pushback from members of the public over the committee's use of confidential sessions to discuss some matters and how we balance up the public interest versus the need for privacy in some of these discussions. So, Scott, can you talk in general about why we go into closed session and specifically with the two reports, why we are needing to consider them in closed session, please?
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I know many of the committee members will be fully aware of this, but essentially legislation enables local authorities to move into private session where there is any discussion or debate regarding what is called exempt information. There are a number of categories. You'll see as part of the website and the agenda papers the specific categories that are being quoted. A common one can be information that relates to the financial or business affairs, and that includes the council itself as well as an individual. Other categories that can also be quite commonly used are also information that reveals the identity of an individual. Hopefully you will appreciate, particularly with the report regarding counter fraud. Unfortunately, some of those individuals who may seek to undertake fraudulent activity would be very interested to understand the means by which we investigate and the extent to which we take action. So that is the main reason why we are using that exempt information category for category 10. Also because it invariably is undertaken by individuals, it will also potentially involve disclosure relating to activities of individuals or multiple parties. The other report that you'll see that subsequently follows, which relates to, again, a further update report regarding the breaches and waivers, that is also proposing to use one of the exempt information categories, but only in relation to the supporting appendix. You will hopefully appreciate that the covering report has been published, and that is showing in the latest supplement for today's meeting.
And as Liz has said in her response to one of the public questions earlier on today, an annual report will be published. So just to give members of the public who may be interested that assurance that this is something that has been considered carefully and isn't just to save the blushes of council in any way, shape or form. So I would like to propose a resolution under section 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 to exclude the press and public from the meeting on the basis that if they were present during the business to be transacted, there would be a likelihood of disclosure of exempt information within the meaning of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. So I'm going to propose that. Can I have a seconder, please? Simon? All those in favour? Any abstentions? And anyone voting against? No, that's fine. So if you could facilitate if we have any members of the public. So I have a hand up online. I can't see who that's from. Hello, Ben.
Hi, Chair. Before we do go into closed committee, do you mind if I just introduce our counter fraud officer just for public record?
Yes, yeah, it would be excellent to hear from Beth and to welcome her to Somerset Council as our vigilant eyes against fraud. So welcome, Beth.
I think it's really important just for the committee here and for that public record and for anyone looking back. So although we will talk about our counter fraud action plan in closed meeting, before we do, it's just to introduce Beth, who has come on to camera. So this is a new post for the council, and I find it quite exciting that it's going to bring forward that strength for the council to our stance on being counter fraud and a zero tolerant to fraud authority. I just wanted to be clear, though, whilst we also have Beth's employment, we also retain SWAP in their proactive and recovery work. One of the things for Beth, and she can talk for herself in a moment, is around driving that focus, so awareness, upskill training, that open reporting that we've been talking about in the committee for a few items, and particularly that publicity of activities internally and externally on current trends and how we can be very counter fraud. Beth, do you want to introduce yourself?
Of course, yeah, so lovely to meet you all. Hopefully in the near future I'll get an opportunity to meet you in person. I'll try and keep it brief because of course conscious of time, but yeah, of course with the recognition with Somerset Council having a zero tolerance to fraud, I feel like they realise there is an opportunity to evidence this as well. So you know, as a council, they're passionate about protecting the public purse, and I think that's where there's been a realisation that there's an opportunity here to bring some of our counter fraud measurement in-house. So yeah, well, of course, my role will be with the intention of preventing, detecting fraud within the council. There's already been a lot of exciting things ongoing. So there's been a lot of meetings with senior management, the commencement of a risk assessment, and of course that will identify where, you know, our highest exposures are to fraud and what we can do as a council to mitigate this. following sort of implementation of any sort of recommendations to controls and things like that as well. They'll always be maintained. So even though we'll implement some controls, they'll still be continually reviewed and spot checked, ensuring that we're kept up to date with legislative changes and updates and fraud trends. Part of my role will be attending, external sort of meetings and collaborating with other organisations. So I think that's an opportunity that we didn't otherwise have before. So yeah, hopefully that will give us the best opportunity to expose all risk areas. Just sort of expanding on something that Ben said there about fraud awareness as well. Awareness is proved to be one of the most effective ways to reduce fraud. So of course, alongside providing a platform for staff and the public to be able to confidently and confidentially report fraud. So sort of alongside all of this as well, what we'll hope to do in the near future is streamline a reporting process, which will, provide us with more transparency insight as to, statistically which areas of the council are generating the most fraud referrals and what can we do as an immediate point to reduce that risk. So so I'm really looking forward to working with you all. And of course, if anyone at any point feels it would be beneficial to meet with me separately or arrange a meeting, then please feel free to email me or contact me.
Thank you, Chair. That was it from us, and it was just that strength that the council takes fraud activity very seriously.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Hello, Amanda speaking. Hello. I'm okay. It's been a busy week, so I'm so sorry we keep missing each other. And yesterday I was on the phone when you called and just
Yeah, can you remove anyone who's not a member or an officer from the online meeting, please? I don't know. They said he's a member.